Okay, so let's get back to Bootstrap. So finally we arrived to this point. So I've been telling you about mentioning a lot Bootstrap. So finally we got to this point to know what it is and how to use it. Okay, so the idea of this presentation of Okay, first of all, the plan will be this one. I will explain today conceptually what Bootstrap is. Then in the next lab, the one you will have on Friday, it is basically about implementing the responsiveness into the website that you have built last time without Bootstrap. You know what I mean? So by doing the same thing that we did today during the class, you will be implementing the responsive behavior to the application that you implemented in the first lab, okay? And then next week, we will start seeing how in practice Bootstrap works, and we will try to implement the Bootstrap behaviors and classes and everything into our project, okay? So today, I will just only tell you conceptually what Bootstrap is. On Friday, you will do the lab without using Bootstrap, and then next week we will see it in practice how it works. So the goal of today is to understand what it is and why it is useful. We will understand what the grid system of Bootstrap is, which are the components and which are the utilities that the framework provides to us. We will understand how Bootstrap deals with the responsive design, and not today, but next time we will see how to use the classes in Bootstrap, okay? So we are still here in the front end. The only difference is that we won't be dealing anymore with the CSS from scratch, but instead of that, we will be dealing with Bootstrap, okay? So what it is a popular front-end framework for building responsive websites. Technically, it is basically a collection of predefined styles and a flexible grid system that we can use. So we can see it as a CSS that someone else implemented that we can use in our project. It basically helps us to create good-looking web pages without having to write from scratch all the CSS in the same way that we did today, no? So that we can use predefined classes and pre-built classes to build our websites. This is super important because it ensures mobile first. So when they designed and they implemented Bootstrap, they had in mind that it was a framework for responsive websites, for mobile websites. So this is an important characteristic. And then one of the reasons we are also using Bootstrap, it is because it was implemented by Twitter, by the Twitter development team. So by using someone that such a huge company built, we can be sure that we have some backup and that there is someone maintaining it and that it complains to the standards and all of that, okay? So it was developed by Twitter and it continues to evolve with major updates being implemented. So within Bootstrap, okay, exactly what does Bootstrap have inside? It has, first of all, a grid system that is a flexible layout structure that enables us to create responsive designs with rows and columns. That is a concept we are already familiar with. It has some predefined components, so it has like user interface elements that they have already implemented and that we can use, so that we don't have to create everything from scratch and try to customize all of the graphical interface components from scratch. So elements like buttons, navigation bars, forms, and modals are already built there and we just use them. They have some utilities that are small classes for common tasks like spacing, like the padding, like For instance, what we saw before that due to that small space, the interface was not being shown as we wanted. So there are utilities that help us with that kind of small issues. It has also an icon set, so that we have like a huge collection of icons that we can use in our website. And it also comes with a lot of samples that we can use to take inspiration from, and they demonstrate how to use the framework in action. Okay, in Bootstrap, it basically works with containers that we already know what a container is, right? It works with rows that we already have used rows in our layout, and it works with columns. Okay, so all of these three concepts are familiar to us. It is built with Flexbox. Okay, we already know what Flexbox is and how it behaves. So the people in Bootstrap, they decided to build the framework using Flexbox. Okay. Does this mean that by using Bootstrap we won't be able to use grid anymore? No. It just means that the classes built with Bootstrap are built thinking the containers within Bootstrap are built and behave as elements within a Flexbox. But other than that, we can use any other thing we have learned so far about CSS. And okay, and it is fully responsive. We will see what it means. So here, when using Bootstrap, we have the container, a class that is called container, that is the most basic layout element that Bootstrap uses and is required when we want to use the grid system. Okay? I don't know if you noticed, but in our structure, in our HTML, we also had this container, no? Do you remember why we created this container? Because, why?
We needed a grid.
Yeah, we needed like a container, like a general container that behaved as a grid, so that all the elements that we placed there were placed within a grid layout. Okay, so that was the reason we started everything by creating a huge container in which all of the elements were placed. Okay, what happens with Bootstrap? Basically the same. The first step is creating like a huge container in which the elements will be placed in. Okay, it's the same logic here. So it is the most basic layout element in Bootstrap, and it's required when using the default grid system. How do we create that? Nothing very difficult. We just have to create a the same as we did in ours. It is just that in our case, we were using myGridContainer. Our class name was myGridContainer. In this case, we will use this name, container. Okay? Where is defined this container? In the CSS files that Bootstrap will provide us. Okay? So it's not magic. It is just that we are using a class that has been implemented and defined by someone else. Okay? And we have two types of containers. The default one and the fluid one. Which one do you think the fluid one is the difference? It will occupy the whole window. Okay? The other one will occupy like the central or some portion of the viewport. The other one will try to occupy all of the window. Okay? If you take a look at this code, what do you think is happening there? So first of all, we have the container, right? So everything starts with the container class. Okay, so up to now, we already know that everything has to start with a container. Then, what do you think is happening? Do you have any guess how the elements are structured here?
They are declaring it as row and call objects, so we're able to apply different classes onto it.
Yeah, so the first thing that we define within a container is a row, no? So we have already the container, and then we define a row. And then within the row, we define columns, that are these ones. Why do you think it behaves like this? Because let's remember that Bootstrap is built using or having in mind a flexbox, no? So it is built over the flexbox element or over the flexbox display. So it's basically replicating with what we can do with flexbox, but by using these classes. So we will just use these classes, but if we had the chance to open them and see how they work, we will see that this one is a display flex. That was exactly the same that we did before. That this one, it's a flex item that will be within the flex container, and it's basically the same logic here conceptually. Okay, so in Bootstrap we have the container, and all of the elements will be placed in rows. Okay, is it clear up to now? So the rows are wrappers for columns. And then here we have something super important, and it is that in Bootstrap, the grid system is as the one shown here. So for instance, here we have the first row. No? This one would be the first row. So when we build something like this, div class row, we are defining this first row. And then within the rows, we can define the columns. Okay? And something you have to learn and to memorize is that there are always 12 columns in our grid system. In Bootstrap grid system, we always have 12 columns. Okay? Okay. Why do you think 12? Why the number? Yeah?
Because it's easily divided. It can be easily divided by a lot of numbers.
Sure, that's why, because it has a lot of, what's the mathematical name for that? Oh, I don't know. Fractions, yeah. Common. Okay, it can be divided into many different numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4 words, 6 words, and 8, and 12, of course. Okay, so it can be divided into so many, and having so many numbers to divide gives us some flexibility to build different kind of interfaces. No? So that's the reason why we're always dealing with 12 templates per column, per row, columns per row. So how do you think this one would look? Something like this. So we basically declare the main container, that is the class container. Then we create a row, and then we set the first column to occupy 8 units of that row, and the second one to occupy 4 units of that row. Without using these classes, we know how to do this. Yeah, we know. We know how to do that with Flex, or we know also how to do this with a grid. But by using the classes, we're basically simplifying that implementation tasks. Okay. And then, if you take a look at this table, what does it look like? What do you think it is? What do you think these breakpoints represent?
Container
The?
size.
Yeah, the size of the, sorry?
Container.
Of the container, yeah, but more than the container, like the screen size, no? It's basically the same that we were doing manually with the media queries. No? So for instance, in our media query, here, we were using randomly these 400 pixels. Why? Because it's a small number and we can think that 400 pixels is a small screen. But in here, in Bootstrap, they have defined a set of values, okay? So it is not 400 anymore, but in their case, it is 576 for an extra small screen. Then they have the small one that is 526, so they consider a small screen the ones having more than 576 but less than 768. So for instance, we can think of this small one as the phone screen. As a phone screen, maybe this one should be like an iPad or a tablet screen, then the large, the extra large, and the extra large. So if we open it, this huge screen, then we are saying that it should be something having more than 1,400 pixels, okay? So these are basically the breakpoints that they are defining. And that in our case, with what we have done so far, corresponds to the media queries that we implemented from scratch, okay? Does this make sense? And why do you think they are important, these default breakpoints? Because they will be the ones that will help us to implement the responsiveness functionality super easy. Okay, so let's remember that we have these dimensions, and that for each dimension there is like this infix or prefix. Okay, so SM, MD, LG, XL, XL, XXL. Okay. So if I show you this code snippet, what do you think it is? How do you think this, for instance, this one is working? Because so far we have seen that we have the container, we have the row, and we have the call, okay? But in this case, when you see call MD8, what do you think it means? Sure, it's exactly that. That this column, when opened from a medium size screen, meaning medium, a screen that has more than 768 pixels and less than 992 pixels. So when I open this from a medium screen, or when I have the available space of a medium screen, it will occupy 8 columns, okay? And then if I open this one from a medium screen, it will occupy 4 columns, okay? In any other screen, or by default, this will occupy half of the screen, no? Because it will occupy 6, and we know we have 12, so this one will occupy half of the screen, okay? What about this one? In a medium screen, they will distribute each one of them occupying 4 columns. So each one will occupy the same, and they will be placed one next to the other. In the other case, how this behaves, this occupy half of the screen, each one of them, so they will place half, and the other one below. Okay? And this one, in this case, they will always occupy the half, even if they are open from a huge window, from a huge screen, or even if they are open from a smaller screen, they will always occupy 6 columns. Why? Because for these specific containers, we haven't defined the class indicating how they would behave with different breakpoints. Okay? Is this clear? So why is this so powerful or so nice? Because we want doing, are we going to have to define the media queries again by hand? No, because by using these classes, all of the responsive behavior will be automatically integrated into our website. So, for instance, if we had Bootstrap in our website, we would say, for instance, that the header, of course, this won't work, but for instance, call no, not this one, but this one. What does this class would represent? I'm sorry. This one. If here, for instance, in the maybe this one. What this would represent? That when the breakpoint or when the screen is small, this will occupy the 12 columns, okay? But, for instance, when the screen is medium, it will occupy just 4, okay? And of course, in the other case here, it would be like if the column is small, it will occupy 12. But if the column is medium, it will occupy 8. Okay? And in this case, we have to make sure, it's not a rule, but of course it will work if we make sure that this addition of these 2 elements make 12. No? Because in this case, this will occupy 8 columns, and this will occupy the other 4 columns.
So it's like a built-in media query that turns on and off the attributes.
Somehow. So it is like someone has created a huge CSS file in which they have defined all of these classes, and it behaves as a flexbox. So it's like a layer of abstraction that they are giving us and saying us, if you use these classes, I can guarantee you that the responsiveness will work, because I've already implemented this on my side, all the CSS, and you can just use that. Okay? It is something as if here we try to abstract this so that anyone can use our CSS. So they did that. Of course, well, the rules that we implemented here are very specific to our specific website. But if I give you this CSS and I tell you, if you use the class, I don't know, grid container, I can guarantee you that you will have a grid container with 6 rows and 3 columns, something like that. So it, just in this case, is kind of useless because it doesn't, it just works in our case. But with Bootstrap, they abstracted all of that and gave us those classes. Okay? Yeah.
How to fill some
If you want for, but the question is if you want to leave like a space, right?
Yes and no. Like we changed our kinds and accidentally left a space. Like
Okay.
we have to change it so that it will become easy to 12, or is it fine?
No. I mean, you just have to have in mind that the whole window has 12 columns. But then you can play with those columns however you want.
Also,
No?
like for example,
So
we
if,
can make 5 and 3.
yeah. You can leave it as 5 and 3, but then you should expect to have like a white space on the right. And if it is fine with you, okay, you can leave it at space. So we are completely free to play with the grid system as any way you want, but always having in mind that by default it will always have the 12 columns. Okay?
I have another question.
Sure.
On some websites, I don't know where, but I saw something like, for example, the header is static, but there is like another container that is starting from like top of the header and going like straight down for like a while.
Okay.
So for example, in that case, why
But you mean like you have the header here,
yes.
and below you have all of the contents?
No, the header is like, for example, it's like 10 columns of header, and then the 2 goes like down for a. It's a big like.
Okay. You mean like like a row here,
Yes.
but the second element is not within the row, but it goes down.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we will have some elements to build that kind of interfaces. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have always to be everything within rows, but also like in Flexbox, the classes could occupy more than one column, so it's possible to deal with that.
But for example, in that case, when we go there, I will have a lot more questions.
Okay. Okay, yeah, give me a chance to get up to there, and then not today, I think, but yeah, with the Bootstrap we can create those kind of complex layouts. So is everything clear with the grid system? This is like the most important part. In some cases, you might choose to use just the grid system, to use Bootstrap just for the grid system. It is up to you, because some people say, I don't like to use the UI components of grid because they all look very similar and I don't want my website to look very Bootstrap, so I don't use the graphical components. But I think the grid system is a very good choice to use Bootstrap for, because it implements all of the responsiveness super easy. So the general layout, the general structure of the website, I would always use Bootstrap to build that. Okay? Yeah.
Bootstrap is just for responsivity, or like I can use Bootstrap and then also like CSS.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's a very good question. We will still continue using our CSS. It is not that if we use Bootstrap, then all of the CSS have to be the Bootstrap CSS. No? So this is super nice because we can decide which parts to get from Bootstrap, which functionalities we can get from them, and which ones do we want to implement by ourselves. So if we think that our buttons or our components are super nice, the ones that we design, the one that we can keep them and use just the grid system from Bootstrap, for instance. It's a choice, it's an alternative, and it's fine. Okay? So on the one hand, remember that we had the grid system. So check on the grid system. Then we have the predefined components. These predefined components are, for instance, buttons, navigation bars, forms, modals, and I think, okay, the predefined components. And I think it is better if we can take a look at them directly on the website. So, okay, most importantly, the website, the Bootstrap website is getbootstrap.com. Okay, and this is the website. Okay, so the elements that I wanted to show you. Okay, in docs, it has like all the documentation. So the same as we had, sorry. Okay, once again, I repeat. So the official website is getbootstrap.com. And the same with, as we have seen with HTML and CSS, we have a page with all of the reference to all of the elements that we have available in the framework. So the reference is in this link that is called docs. And here it basically has the information that I have already told you on how to get started with Bootstrap, how to import Bootstrap in our website, and how to create like the hello world using Bootstrap, okay? Here we have, okay, like the customization options. It has the explanation on the layout. So it is here that they explain which are the available breakpoints, that are the ones that I reported in the slide. How the containers behave. So we have the container fluid. Well, it has basically the description. And then below this, we have, okay, it has all sort of components and explanations. So for instance, it has something concerning the typography, how to deal with the typography within Bootstrap, so how the headers behave and look within the framework. If, for instance, we wanted to add like a secondary text, we can easily do that by using a class that they have for that secondary text, that it automatically formats our text in this way. It has also these display headings, so if we wanted to create like a super huge header here, we could use this class. And the way of using this class, what is it? Always by applying a class to a specific element. So this is basically the strategy or the mechanism with Bootstrap. It always consists of applying specific classes to achieve a specific visual output. I don't know if there is something nice to show here. So, this is kind of simple, but if we want to create a quote of like this one, we just use the classes and it works. It seems kind of stupid or simple or trivial to do this, but if we try to think how we could implement this kind of font with this specific size, with this specific color, by doing it from scratch is kind of not difficult but boring, and it's a trial error process in which we have to try different colors, different fonts until we get to something we like. So in this case, the advantage of using Bootstrap is that they already have like predefined classes that we can use immediately. Okay, they have lists. Okay, this was concerning typography. Concerning images, they have responsive images. Okay, and let's try to check like some more interesting components. So, for instance, a card, no? So, do you remember that in our layout, we were thinking, for instance, that this one could be a card, no? Like the ones having like the tutor description. So that we wanted a card with an image and with some information on the side. So here, for instance, we have cards that are components like this one, no? How do we use a card? Basically by copy-pasting this code, okay? Because in here, it has already all the definitions for using a card. What else? For instance, if we want a card here with a title, with some description, and then with 3 links or 3 items that we can click, we can easily build something like this by copy pasting the code, and then all of the classes and all of the styling is already defined within these classes. We can create a class with a header and a footer, with a button. Let me see if I find something more interesting. Okay, something like this, like a card that occupies the whole screen, that is similar to what we want to build. This one might be the one that works for us, no? That is the one that has like the tutor picture on the right side, then it has the tutor name, maybe a description or the tutor phrase or quote, and maybe here some button or something like this. Okay. Does this mean that we can't use anymore our CSS? Or that if we define the CSS to apply a border to this card, it won't be useful anymore? No. It just means that we can use some of their classes to build the components, but we can still customize all of them. So the reason why we devoted all of this time to understanding how CSS works, how HTML works, is basically that, because you can still customize all of the components that they use. We can create a layout like this one, super easy, by copying the CSS. So the card, I don't know, maybe I can show you the carousel, that is also very useful. So have you seen that in many websites they have like the carousel where they show pictures, or like in the landing page they show some description? So it's basically built with this component. It might have captions. Okay. So it's basically pretty similar in all of the cases, but in our case, for instance, we implemented the navbar from scratch, no? So if we come here, we can see that Bootstrap already has like some pre-built navbars. So in our case, instead of creating the container and setting up the links, we could just simply use their classes, and their classes behave like this, and we can create like a more complex and visually more appealing navigation bar. Okay, so that's the idea. Questions so far? Is it clear how Bootstrap works? Perfect. As I told you, today we won't start practicing with Bootstrap. I just want to make sure to show you what it is and conceptually understand it, and then next class we will start playing with this. In the lab, you are not expected to use Bootstrap, but if you want to use it by yourself or try to experiment with Bootstrap, you are free to do so. So, it is up to you. And then Bootstrap has also like a examples website. Where basically they give you some ideas or templates that you can take into account to start or to implement or to take inspiration from to integrate into the website. So for instance, if I open this one, it has this component that is called Jumbotron, but I don't know if, for instance, in our case, it would be useful. You tell me. No, I don't know, but maybe the cards, we could take some inspiration, for instance, for the description. We can use something like this. Or let's try to find out. This one could be nicer, no? And so that, for instance, the tutor description can be written within a component like this one. Or for instance, we can use this component, this container, as a description. Who are we, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe we can make this one become like the most popular tutors, and here with the description and the picture of each tutor. So basically the idea of the framework is that these, let's say, problems or these design decisions that we are facing, someone has faced them before. And Bootstrap is an abstraction layer that we can use to easily implement and to easily build our website. Once again, do we have to use everything Bootstrap says, and if Bootstrap doesn't have a specific component, we can't use that? No, we still have the choice to implement things by ourselves. We still have the choice to customize the CSS, and well, it's just a resource that is very useful. And the most important part about Bootstrap is this one, no? Did you see that here, for instance, automatically by the behavior you were asking me before, no? So here, if we have all the screen, we have the search field and we have the button. Then if we shrink the screen, it automatically builds for us this menu with the links we want and the search button, okay? So this is super powerful. I mean, you are free to choose which features of Bootstrap do you want to use, but my advice is for the responsive behavior, use the grid system, at least the grid system. Then if you want to use the cards or the carousel or the buttons or it's up to you, but at least the grid system, I think it's worth it to use it. So for instance, in this case, automatically these cards or these components below, did you see that all of them place one below the other one? And if we take a look at the code, then you can see that this, let me see if that this behavior is achieved just by using these classes. No? That all of them occupy 4 when they are in a large display, and when they are not in a large display, then they occupy all of the space. So just by setting this class to a specific component, let's say for instance, so for instance, just by changing that value, now they don't occupy 4 and they don't occupy 4 columns in equally distributed, but they occupy 6, no? So they occupy half of the screen just by changing the class value, okay? I don't know if, for instance, her, can you ask her, please? Yeah. I don't know if, for instance, this one is similar to what you were saying me before. That it has like the heading there, and then it has on the left side like this column with the elements. Yeah. So somehow this is similar. Maybe what you are saying me is that you want this one to get up to the top, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then we can see how to customize this so that this gets over the navigation bar, but it's still possible. Okay. And okay, then I forgot to show you this. That is kind of useful too. That are like the the Bootstrap icons. So it is a set of, I don't know, thousands of icons that you can use in your website for almost anything. So for instance, in all of the links or the navigation bar items, we could have integrated one icon to show something, or I don't know. These are like general purpose icons that you can use all over the website. We have lots of them. Yeah, it's basically something pretty similar to Google Fonts, no? That are resources that we have there and we can integrate or import in our website and use them whenever we want. So up to now, do we have questions about CSS? About Bootstrap, sorry? Conceptually. Nice. So once again, I won't do the practical part of Bootstrap today because we already have not that much time, and I want to start it next week so that we can devote more time. In the lab that I will be publishing today, I won't be requiring you to use Bootstrap. It is intended to be solved by using media queries. It is to add responsiveness to what you built last week, but with media queries. So I would ask you to try to use it with media queries. But anyway, if you feel you want to experiment and try to learn how to use Bootstrap, here in the slides that you find on the website, there are like these three steps that you can use to import Bootstrap. Okay, so you can import Bootstrap, and we already know at least how to create the grid component, how to deal with the responsiveness. So I would ask you first to try to solve it with the media queries, and then if you have time in the lab, try to use it with Bootstrap. Okay. Nice questions. In the Friday's lab, I won't be there. Instead of me, there will be Professor De Russis. I don't know if you know him, Luigi De Russis. Okay, and it will work the same as the last one. And very important, since I saw that we have already we already have space in the classroom. You are free to come in the first session or in the second one. If you are not able, or if you want to stay, if you come to the first session and you want to stay the 3 hours, you are free to do so. Okay, so see you next week.